Hi guys, this is Amar and welcome to Network Engineer Stuff. So guys, in this video we are going to focus on OSPF chapter number 5, which is all about the basic OSPF lab configuration. So in this video we're going to see multiple things. Basically we are going to start configuring OSPF from scratch. We are going to configure something known as process ID, which we have already learned. We will be configuring router ID, which we have already learned that what is router ID. We already had a dedicated chapter on router ID and process ID. So guys, if you have not watched those videos, you can go and watch those videos in this series. Then we will see how to advertise the networks, how we can advertise network in OSPF, how to verify the OSPF neighbor relationship, how to verify OSPF routes, and understand what happens internally after starting OSPF. So multiple things which we are going to see in this particular chapter, that is chapter number 5. So for this, what I've done is I've made one lab. So this is our lab which we will be seeing. This is a very basic simple lab where you can see we have two routers. One is a router R1 and the other one is a router R2 over here. Okay. So this R1 and R2 and R1. So these are connected via link. Okay. And this particular link have this IP address 12.1.1.1/30 on R1 side and on R2 side 12.1.1.2/30. So I've used this particular IP address over here, and for this LAN side of R1 I've used this particular subnet, that is 192.168.1.1, and on R2 side I've used 192.168.2.1/24. So and I've also configured this PCs. So I do have this lab. I'll just share it. So guys, what I've done is I have configured the IP addresses things on for that lab. So which would help us. So this is our lab. Okay. So I have configured the IP addresses. I've also configured the loopback addresses also, if you see here. So we have some loopback addresses. That is for R1 I've configured 1.1.1.1, and loopback, under loopback I've configured it is loopback 100, and I've given this IP address 100.100.100.100. Similar way for R2 also I've configured the loopback. I'll just show you the router itself. So this is my R1. So show IP int brief. So this is my very favorite command. So here you can see this is 12.1.1.1, which is the interface getting connected to R2. This is the LAN interface which is getting connected to the switch and later on to the PCs. These are the two loopbacks which I have configured, that is 1.1.1.1 and 100.100.100.100. Similarly on R2 also, let's verify if we have configured the IPs. Show IP interface brief. So this is the interface getting connected to R1. This is getting connected to the LAN part. These are the two loopbacks. Okay. So this is what we have configured. Now, while configuring OSPF, what is the very first step when we are configuring OSPF? So just go in the config terminal, start configuring. So the very first thing what we will configure in OSPF is the command router OSPF followed by the process ID. Okay, so this is what I'm doing. So currently I have nothing configured in OSPF. You can see I have not configured anything. If you want to see, I can show you currently what I have configured. If you see, like show OSPF, show IP OSPF neighbor, there's nothing. Even show run, we'll see in show run, you will find nothing. So there is no OSPF configuration currently on the router. So there is no OSPF running on the router. Now by giving this command router OSPF, okay, I'll give a question mark. This is followed by the process ID. Now, we already have studied about what is process ID. Okay, process ID is the name of that particular process. Okay, we already have a dedicated chapter on this one. So this is process ID, something which is locally significant. Now here is the available range we can use for the process ID, that is from 1 to 65,535. So in the theory chapter, I think I have added this particular slide also, dedicated slide toward this range also. So this is the range. Okay. Now this is locally significant. Now if I configure a router, oh, I think it is getting logged out. Oh, in the config T router OSPF. Okay. So if I, let's say, configure router OSPF 1 over here, and if I configure router OSPF 2 on R2, it doesn't going to make any difference. Okay, because they are locally significant, and you can use any number. They may or may not match with each other. Now I've pressed enter. Right now, the moment I've pressed enter, okay, after giving this command router OSPF 1, the very first thing what have happened currently is that the OSPF will determine its router ID. Now, what is router ID? Router ID is nothing but the name of that OSPF router in that OSPF domain. So it have determined the router ID. Now, if you see here, show IP OSPF. Now this is there are multiple commands. Now this is the command where you can see the router ID. Now this is the command which is used to determine the router ID. Show IP OSPF. Okay. Now you can see over here, guys, the router ID, that is 100.100.100.100. Now this is the router ID. Now why this is the router ID? Because we already know, what is router ID basically. So router ID is nothing but it is the highest loopback IP address, right? It is the highest loopback IP address. Now if you see over here, show IP int brief. Okay, so out of this IPs, multiple IPs, we have some physical interface, we have some loopback interface. Now it is basically the highest loopback IP address. Now here the highest, they have two loopbacks, right? 1.1.1.1 and 100.100.100.100. Now here 100.100.100.100 is greater than 1.1.1.1. So that is the reason why we have this router ID as 100.100.100.100. So here you can see the router ID. Okay. So this is my router ID. Now if it's go on router 2, so let's go on router 2. Now if you check show IP OSPF, you have not configured anything. Now I'll go in the config T, I'll give the command router OSPF the process ID. Now I can give any number, let's say I give 2. Okay. The moment I give this, the OSPF process is started, and the very first thing what OSPF have done here is has determined its router ID, which is the name of that router, OSPF router in the OSPF domain. Show IP OSPF. Now you can see over here the router ID is 200.200.200.200. Why? Because again we will see over here, show IP interface brief. You have two loopbacks, and the highest loopback IP is 200.200.200.200. That is the reason the router ID is 200.200.200. Now what we will do is on R1, we will do something, because the router ID theory says that, in case the loopback interface is absent, it will be the highest active interface IP address. Now here we have two loopbacks. Okay. So what I'll do is simply I'll go in the config and I'll do no interface 100. No interface. Loopback 100. So I've deleted the loopback 100, and then I'll do loopback 1 also I'll delete. Okay. So I've deleted 1 and I've deleted 100. So I've deleted both of the loopback interfaces. Now if you check show IP int brief, okay, there are no loopback addresses. So what router ID says, router ID definition says is that router ID in OSPF is the highest loopback interface, and in absence of the loopback interface, it will be the highest active physical interface IP address. Now we have two here active physical interfaces, which is Ethernet 1/0 and 1/1. Now they have IP address 12.1.1.1 and the other one is have the IP address 192.168.1.1.1. Now here the router ID should be now 192.168.1.1.1. Now let's see whether the router ID, what is the router ID? Show IP OSPF. Now still you can see the router ID is 100.100.100.100, which is already deleted, right? We deleted the loopback interface, but still it is there. Now the reason behind this is that OSPF router ID do not change on the fly. It requires an OSPF process to be restarted, and which can be achieved in two ways. Okay, we will need the OSPF process to be restarted. Either we can reload the device. Okay, so that is one option, and the other option is to clear that OSPF process, to reset that OSPF process. Now how to do it? I'll give you a command. Now to reload, guys, this is the command to reload, but I won't use this because it will take time. So the better option is to go with this command, clear IP OSPF process. So I'll just press enter over here. Reset process, OSPF processes, I'll say yes. Now we will check. You can see a check, guys, here that the router ID is updated. Now it is 192.168.1.1. Okay, so this is how the router ID changed. But I want my loopback interface, guys, so I'll configure back my loopback interfaces. So loopback interface, loopback 100, IP address 100 dot IP address 100.100.100.100 255.255.255.255, and I had another loopback interface, that is loopback interface loopback 1 IP address 1.1.1.1 255.255.255.255. So I had just two loopback interfaces. I've configured those back. Show IP int brief. Now I've configured those back. Let me check now my OSPF router ID. Show IP OSPF. Still the OSPF router ID is 192.168.1.1.1. Okay, so this is not changed because router ID don't get changed on the fly. It requires the OSPF process restart, and which can be achieved either by reload or by giving the command clear IP OSPF process. So guys, I have got my got the loopback interface configured back. Now also currently if you see, it is not going to change this OSPF router ID over here, because it will require a reload or clear IP OSPF process. So what I'll do is, if we have already studied in the theory also, that relying on automatic selection can be very unpredictable. Sometimes we have already seen that we deleted that loopbacks, but still the router ID was the loopback. So relying on this automatic selection of the router ID in OSPF is very unpredictable, and so its best practice is to configure manually the router ID. Okay, so if you are configuring the router ID manually, then of course that will be always the router ID of that OSPF process. Okay, of that OSPF router. So guys, what I'll do is for changing the router ID, configuring the router ID manually, I'll go into router OSPF 1, that is under this OSPF process. I'll give the command router ID 1.1.1.1. Okay, I'll give it. I'll give clear IP OSPF process. Reset all OSPF process. Yes. And now I'll go and check the OSPF process. I'll check the OSPF router ID, show IP OSPF. Now you can see the OSPF router ID is 1.1.1.1. Now for R2 also I'll change it to 2.2.2.2. Now currently here show IP OSPF. Here it is 200.200.200. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go on the config T router OSPF 2 router ID 2.2.2.2. So give clear IP OSPF process. Sorry, clear IP OSPF process. Yes. And now I'll check show IP OSPF. Now you can see here the router ID changed to 2.2.2.2. So it's the best practice that you manually configure the router ID. Never rely on automatic selection of the router ID because it is unpredictable. Now let's go back over here. Okay. So you've seen this lab. Okay. So of course we configured the router IDs over here. This router ID we took, has the router ID 1.1.1.1, and here we have took 2.2.2.2, this one particularly. Okay. Now what we have seen, the first thing once the router OSPF starts is it determined its router ID. Now what is router ID? Router ID is nothing but the name of the OSPF router in the OSPF domain. So how is this a router ID selection? What is the order? Now if you have manually configured router ID, it will take that, basically the router ID. If you have not configured it manually, then it will be highest loopback IP address, and if in the absence of the loopback IP address, it will be the highest active physical interface IP address. We have already seen this, but again we have already saying that never rely on automatic selection of the router ID because it is unpredictable. Always configure the router ID manually. So again we have seen this thing that router ID do not get changed on the fly. It will need the OSPF process to be restarted, and to restart OSPF process we have two options. Either we can go for a reload of the router itself, or we have to clear the IP OSPF process. Now we will see how to configure the OSPF more detail, like how to advertise the network and everything, because currently we have seen that we have just configured the OSPF. We have just started the process of the OSPF, and we have configured the router ID. So currently we have configured this step and this step. These two particular things are something which is very interesting, that are the network advertisement, how we can advertise the network, how the OSPF interfaces are added, and lot of other stuff. So guys, of course we'll see this, but I think I don't want to make the video more lengthy. So I have a lot of stuff to show basically, guys. So we'll go in the maybe in the second video of this chapter number 5, and we will check all the stuff over there. Till then I'll stop here. I'll catch up in the next video, maybe in this chapter number 5B we will call it, and we will see the rest of the configuration over there. Okay. So guys, thank you. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye and have a nice day. Thank you.